On our series tonight on modern fertility treatments in Halacha. Last week we started discussing surrogacy and donor eggs in terms of the first question, which really leads into our share tonight. So last week we were discussing the obvious question, which is what's dealt with mostly by most poskim, is who is the mother in the case of surrogacy or donor eggs. So in the case of surrogacy, you have the husband and wife. It's their egg and sperm, whereas the baby is simply incubated, if you want, or carried by the surrogate mother to term, and then the biological parents get the baby back. In the case of donor eggs, the sperm is the husband's, the egg is actually somebody else's, a donor, and the wife is the one who carries the baby. So two different scenarios. So we discussed last week a very large machlokas, how we view...
the mother carries the baby, said?
And the mother carries the baby. So that's how a donor egg works. The egg is donated, but everything else is within the family, as we may say.
All in the family.
So all in the family. So
not really.
So we discussed last week that there's many different opinions. There actually are four options, of which three I've seen, the fourth I have not. So option one is, it is the birthing mother, ha'im ham yaledet. So that's one option. The option two is that it's the genetic mother or the one who provides the genetic material, the egg. Option three is it's a combination of both. So both of them have some halachic status as mothers, because each one is doing, if you want, part of the task of creating the baby. One is donating the genetic material, the other one is the one who's carrying the baby to term. And the fourth option, obviously, is neither of them are the mothers, which hypothetically is a possibility, but we didn't really see really anyone who practically says such a thing. So we have three opinions. Opinion one...
Combination, meaning for certain
So l'chumra both ways, essentially. So we saw the Chuvas Van Hagos, the Rebbe Rishtambuch brought down the Gemara in Sota. Just a quick recap. The Gemara in Sota says that Goliath was called Ish HaBeinayim. So what's Ish HaBeinayim? So there's 4 or 5 different pshatim in the Gemara. What does the pasuk mean in Navi when it says Ish HaBeinayim? He's between, or what was he exactly? So one pshat in the Gemara is that his mother, Orpah, was essentially, they call it raped.
Orpah was his mother?
Yes. Right? So that his mother essentially slept with 100 men and got pregnant with him. So Tosfos understands that Ish HaBeinayim means that he was essentially came from all these men together. All of them had some sort of, which is, I'm not going to the biological reality of that, but at least the halachic reality is we don't know who the father is. So maybe we assume that all of them technically are the father. Okay, which brings us into the whole discussion, of course, when you have nowadays with genetic splicing and genetic editing, where you can take, as has happened recently, we discussed last week in China. A few weeks ago, there was a whole article on the news about you can potentially take genetic material from several different eggs and different mothers and sort of lump it together and splice it, and then you get your wonder baby who can make coffee from the time he is 1 week old, right? So, so what would be the status there? A whole different discussion, but basically you can see where that's going. There could be halachic significance to several different people as a parent, it seems, according to that Tosfos. Rashi has a different shot. According to Rashi, this whole thing's irrelevant. So Chuvas Van Hagos, Rosh Hashanah brings that perhaps we have to treat it as both of them being parents. Both of them have some part of this process, so both of them have to be parents. So that was Rosh Hashanah. We saw people who said it was the birthing mother. Again, we had Makoros last week. The birthing mother is the one who gives birth. In this case, it will be the surrogate mother, or it will be, in the case of a donor egg, it will be the wife. So the birthing mother is the one who is the halachic mother. I'm not going to go into the whole discussion we had last week. And then we saw opinions. So people who said that were, for example, Razam and Nehemiah, who said that really it's the birthing mother. The Tzitz Eliezer held that essentially it's the birthing mother who is the real halachic mother. And then we saw opinions that said the other way around. They said it was the genetic mother, or the mother at conception, if you want, who is the real halachic mother. Rav Goren was one of those opinions. There are other people. Rav Avadia's opinion is actually a very big machlokas, or dichotomy, or he has different opinions. It seems like he changed his mind in different times. So Rav Avadia, at some point, it seems he held it was really the genetic mother, at least initially.
No one ever pinned him down before he...
He was pinned down many times, and he gave different psakim each time.
Really?
So this is where Ravaj's psak is very confusing, and it seems that ultimately he held some form of we have to be machmir like both. So Rosh Shlomo Zalman, it's quoted. Rosh Shlomo Zalman is quoted. Rabbi Nevitzal quotes Rosh Shlomo Zalman as saying that it's the genetic mother, but ultimately, when push comes to shove, it seems that most poskim held you have to be machmir both ways, or a lot of poskim held you have to be machmir both ways. So Rav Shlomo Zalman is brought down, Rav Eliashiv, we saw Rav Steinbuch. So Rav Zalman Nechemia himself seems to, even though he holds it's the birthing mother, seems to say it's the birthing mother, but the makoros for this, obviously these things didn't exist in the time of Chazal, so the makoros are very weak either way you take it, so therefore he seems to be machmir also. You have to assume perhaps both. You have to be machmir both ways. We'll see what that means in a second. So that was the discussion we had last week. Obviously this has a lot of significance as to, okay, who is your mama? Okay, who's your papa? Who's your daddy, as they say, right? So that is what the significance is. But the big question is, okay, so we've discussed all of that. Who gets put as the mother on the halachic birth certificate? But what implications does it have as far as actually carrying out the procedure? Is it mutter? Is it even mutter to carry out surrogacy? Is it mutter to have something called a donor egg as far as halacha? Now, just a historical reminder of when this started. IVF, the first IVF baby was born in 1978 in England. Okay? IVF started in Israel in 1982. That's when it officially became sanctioned by Misrad Abiyut. 1982. Surrogacy and donor eggs, if I'm not mistaken, started in 1986. Okay? 1986, that was the first baby. First baby is a surrogacy, and if I'm not mistaken, also donor eggs. So you're talking about 1986, that's only, 30 years ago, plus minus. So because it's 1986, Rav Moshe doesn't have any chuvas on it. Rav Moshe was nifta in 1986. Okay? If you think of many of the other persons don't have chuvas on it. And even the ones that do, it was a preliminary, very often preliminary chuvas, and as I mentioned with Rav Vadia, these changed as the things became more regulated, became more common. Surrogacy and egg donor are not very common things, or at least have not been in Israel till very recently. Recently, they've started to really, and this is what I've read, that the numbers are starting to really ramp up, and there's a lack of surrogates and there's a lack of egg donors, as you can imagine, things like that, especially surrogates. Egg donors is a one-time commitment, but surrogate is you have to pay a lot. It's a very expensive procedure, very expensive to pay off whoever who's donating in the case of a donor egg, or surrogate even more so, who's carrying the baby for 9 months. So it's a big commitment. It's a big commitment. It has lots of legal ramifications also. We discussed a bit of that last week, especially in the United States, where every state has totally different laws. So for example, New York, if I remember correctly, New York State doesn't allow this. You have to go somewhere else. You have to go to different states. You have to cross state boundaries to do. Every state has a whole different. Every state is totally different. So
they allow abortion in the 9th month.
They allow abortion post 9th month now. So anyway. So what are the ramifications? Is it even mutter to do such a thing, given our discussion last week? So this is where we come to our sheet this week, and we're going to go through a couple of different opinions and some different points and challenges that are brought up in poskim as to whether it's even allowed, it's even permissible, and if so, how would it be permissible? How do we mitigate the risks? To quote my technology background, how do we mitigate any of the risks that we have in the process?
Well, one posik, my wife.
One posik, your wife,
tells me that religious women do use egg donors and do surrogacy. So there's got to be a way to do it.
Let's go through this and then let's see. Okay, so the first issue which comes up exactly following on from what we just discussed is the problem of yichus. We just said that according to a lot of poskim, Rosh Steinbuch seems to say that's quite clearly that it's a possibility of having multiple parents, multiple mothers, multiple fathers, even potentially in the case of Goliath. So, but even other poskim are machmir both ways. So there's an obvious question of yichus. Is that a problem to actually doing the procedure? So the Mishnah Yevamos tells us, this is number one here. Mishnah Yevamos Mem Aleph, Amud Aleph tells us, Hayavama lo tzachlos v'lo yabim. Someone whose husband was nifta, now she has to do yibum. She's not supposed to do yibum chalitza ad sheyesh lo shlosha chodashim, until she's had a break of 3 months from her first husband. V'chein kol hashar hanashim, and similarly all other women, lo yisarasu v'lo yinasu ad shiyu lehen shlosha chadashim. If their husband chas v'shalom was nifter or they got divorced, they're not allowed to get remarried for 3 months. Okay, so what is the reason for that? What is the reason for that? So the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shmuel, Rav Nachman says the name is Shmuel, the Amar Kra liyos lecha le'elokim u'lezarcha acharecha. The end Parshas Lech Lecha. That Hashem says to us that He's going to be for us le'elokim u'lezarcha acharecha. Says the Gemara, L'zarcha acharecha. What is zarcha acharecha? Lahavchin bein zaro shel rishon to zaro shel seni. That means you have to know who your zera is. You have to know who your children are. You have to know who your children are. L'zarcha acharecha. Who's your zera? So therefore, the reason why we have to have 3 months between one marriage and another, essentially, is we have to be able to wait 3 months to see whether she's pregnant from the first husband. And if so, now we know the baby is misyaches to the first husband. Or, when she gets married after that, if she gets married after that, we know that the baby is from the second husband. We know how to decide whose child that is.
Does this requirement have to wait 3 months? Like, is that till a certain age? Because after a certain age, women can't have children.
Very, very, very good question. There's a lot of discussion in poskim about all these things. But let's just stay with this for now. Otherwise, we'll sidetrack. So that's what the Gemara says. There's a reason why you have to wait 3 months. You know, lahavchin. Gimel chochech havchana, it's called in halacha. You have to be able to differentiate, and therefore be able to tell who is the baby, who's the father of the baby, who's the mother of the baby. Okay. Okay, good question. So says Rashi, if you look at number 2, we'll go back to the rest of the Gemara soon. Says Rashi number 2 here, what's the lezarcha acharecha? She'ein hashchina shora. The shchina cannot be shora, it says liyos lecha le'elokim, right? The shchina cannot be shora el al havadaim. Shezaro miyuchas acharav. The shchina is only shora on families or on people that know who they are. And brings another Gemara in Nadarim. It speaks about 10 different types of children that are pagum. One of the 10 types of problematic children are children who are arbuvia, who are confused, messed up. It's not their fault. I mean, a lot of children are confused and mixed up. But that's not what we mean here. We mean that they're confused. Who's my daddy? Right? They don't know who their father is. I just want to say a really bad joke that I heard when I was a kid. And it used to be maybe a bit more of a racist joke, but I don't think it is anymore. The joke went something like this. What is the most confusing day in Harlem? Father's Day. Okay, so you already know this. Okay? The thing is, nowadays I'm not even sure it's limited it's not limited to any color. I think if you go across a lot of Western society in the United States, you will find just black, white, doesn't make a difference. The number of kids who are born out of wedlock, if I'm not mistaken, it's over 50% of kids born out of wedlock already, or it's something very high like that. With that and promiscuity and everything else, how many kids do not know who their real parents are, or how many kids think they know who their parents are and unfortunately don't really know who their parents are? It's a very, very big issue. So this is something which is specific to us. As you said, it's actually machlokes in the poskim with Doraisa Drabanan, but there is an inyan, whatever it is, that we have to differentiate. So therefore, if we have to differentiate, kol shekain, we shouldn't put ourselves in a situation where we have no clue. So if you're going to say that in the case of donor eggs or surrogacy, we don't really know who the father and mother is, again, assuming like the poskim who say we're not sure, we have to be machmer both ways, there is a valid reason to say maybe we shouldn't do this. Because we're causing ourselves yichus problems down the line. No.
With fertility treatments, we always know the father is. With egg donors and surrogacy, we always know the father is.
Yeah, well, this is an example. Okay, but l'chora, l'zacha acharecha, this is no different l'chora between knowing who the mother is and who the father is.
Doesn't yichus go to the father though?
In certain, yes, in certain things.
Judaism goes
obviously,
to the mother, but yichus makes
so some things do and some things don't. Yeah. Right. Okay, so that is the first comment. So according to the Rav Sternbuch then, Rav Sternbuch writes explicitly in his Chuvas, he is against donor eggs, he is against surrogacy, because it's issues of yichus. And we have an inyan, we have a special thing that we're supposed to, the Jewish people are supposed to know, they have to know who they are. So if you look at the Gemara in 3 in Kiddushin, there's a whole parak, if you think about it, the fourth parak of Kiddushin is Asara Yuchsin. Right? 10 different types of categories of Jews based on whether we know who their father is, we don't know who they all sorts of different combinations of who kids might be. Asufi, Shtuki, all these different things. So the Gemara there speaks about Yichus. So number 3, the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina. This is Kedushin Ayin Amar Beis. Amar Rabbi Chama Rabbi Chanina. Kshakash Baruch Hu Mashre Shchinoso. When Hashem puts down the Shechina in Jewish people of Klal Yisrael, Ein Mashre Ela Al Mishpachos Miyuchaso Shebi Yisrael. He only is Mashre the Shechina on families that know who they are, that have Yichus. Shenemar Va'esahinu Mashem Heyel Elokim L'chol Mishpachos Yisrael. L'chol Yisrael. It says I'm going to be your Hashem for Mishpachos Yisrael. L'chol Yisrael. It doesn't say just L'chol Yisrael, which would be the simple way of saying it. Ela L'chol Mishpachos. Families. They know who their families are. And then they will be my people. So that's why the Gemara, the whole fourth parak of Kedushin is focusing on what Yichus. How do we know who belongs to which family, who your father and mother is, and things like that. So, based on this, like we said, this is a very good reason why we would have a problem introducing the Chatchila, a situation where we don't know who the parent is. If you hold like the poskim that we're choshesh for both Sadim, both mothers, essentially. Okay? So some people say, what about if we use, we're going to get this in a bit more, what about using a donor egg from a guy? What using a surrogate from a guy? We're going to get to why you might say that very soon. So the continuation of the Gemara number 1 says, what about a ger? The Gemara says another, brings a brisa. Lefichach ger v'gioris tzrichim, this is like 3 lines to the bottom of number 1. A ger and gioris also, if they're miskayer, they have to wait 3 months.
What are you reading?
I'm reading 3 lines from the bottom of number 1.
Okay.
Meisi Rabbi, Lefichach ger v'gioris tzrichim lahantin gil chadashim. A ger and a gioris who miskayer, let's say they were married, they have to wait 3 months before they can join again. Why? What's the problem? We know who the father and mother is. What's the issue? Says the Gemara, Hachinami ika lahavchin ben zera shenizra b'kedusha lezera shelo nizra b'kedusha. We want to know. Was this baby conceived b'kedusha or not? Now, regardless, the baby can be miskayer, but still, we want to know. Okay? So that's issue 1, which the Gemara says. That's the reason you have to have 3 months havchana. It's an inyan of yichus. It's interesting. In Bamidbar, Perek Aleph Bamidbar speaks about how they counted all the shvatim. Right? That's how Bamidbar, Sefer Bamidbar starts out. And the pasuk there tells us, Vayisialdu. This is Perek Aleph in Bamidbar pasuk Yudches. V'et kol ha'ida hikilu. They gathered everyone together. Be'echad lachodesh hasheni. Vayisialdu al mishbechosam leveis avosam. And it's hard to translate what that means exactly. They gathered together according to their families, according to their Beis Avosam. What does that mean? So Rashi says, they bought their family trees. I belong to this family, I'm living with this, in this part of the camp. Each of them had their family tree. That is what's special for Klal Yisrael. We don't want to have a situation where we're like much of the Western world right now, which is degenerating into no one knows who their parents are. Hopefully it doesn't degenerate any further. Hopefully it will rebound. But as of now, that's the situation. So that's something which is special for Klal Yisrael. We can't break that. Whether it's not sure within a Jewish parents who they are, or even a guy. We want to know if we need to know whether it's zera shenizar b'kedusha, shelo b'kedusha. Okay. So that is one point. Another point which is brought is by Rav Vazner. Rav Vazner in his Tshuva and Shevet HaLevi brings a.
Is it here on the sheet?
It's not on the sheet, but I'm quoting you his proof in a second. So Rav Vazner in Shevet HaLevi brings another interesting issue, and he says what I defined here as marital kedusha. There's an issue of marital kedusha. I'm not even talking about issa v'heta necessarily, but a marital kedusha. What does that mean? So he quotes the pasuk in Bereshis. We say v'davak be'ishto al ken yazov ish es ish ve'esimo. A person, because as the Torah tells us, Chava was taken from Adam. Al Kain Yazov Ishes Ish V'Ishto V'Davak V'Ishto V'Hayu L'Basar Echad. Okay, a person leaves his father and mother. V'Davak V'Ishto V'Hayu L'Basar Echad. So what does that mean? So the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Sanhedrin Nafnu Chesam Udalef. Sort of we can skip till the second line. V'Davak V'Lo B'Zachar. V'Davak means, therefore, V'Davak, you join together. That means we're not talking about homosexuality where you're not joining together. Be'ishto, v'lo be'eshes chavero. V'davak be'ishto, you should be together with your wife and not with someone else's wife. V'hayu l'basar echad. What does that mean, v'hayu l'basar echad? Mi shenesim basar echad. Those that together become one unit. Yatu behem v'chaya she'ein nesim basar echad. That comes to exclude that a person should not be having bestiality, relations with animals. Now this is talking about the Bnei Noach also. This is Pashas Bereshis. It's not just talking about the Jews. It's talking about humanity in general. Humanity is mitzvah. Goyim are commanded not to have homosexuality, not to be involved in homosexuality. Goyim are commanded not to have bestiality.
On all the arayas, no?
Yeah, on all the arayas, yeah.
What about Eshes Ish?
Bu'ulas Baal, yes. They also have Eshes Ish, yes.
Even though it's not really Kedushin by God.
Correct. That's why Vihi Bu'ulas Baal, right. Once and marriage is consummated, they are considered to be married, halachically.
It's like they can't marry two sisters, right? They can't.
So the Rambam in Hilchos Melachim, when he says Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, really six mitzvahs of Adam, whatever, the mitzvah of Arayos, the Rambam starts enumerating that it's not really Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, it's a very big misnomer. If you take Arayos, there's I don't remember how many, it's 30, I don't remember how many he enumerates. But you know exactly all the different details of this and that, and your brother, your sister, and all the different mitzvahs technically which are part of Arayos. It's really Sheva categories Bnei Noach, if you want. Right. It's not really Sheva mitzvahs Bnei Noach. So you're right, yes. So so you see from the Gemara, says the Gemara, so this is the tivoy that you have to stay V'hayu l'basar echad. What does that mean, V'hayu l'basar echad? Says Rashi, Perish Rashi, Shenesa l'basar echad, shezera yotze mehem. What does it mean by Yul Basar Echad? So Rashi, Perish, is not that the husband and wife become one unit, which is how we always get told when out in our chassan classes and Shera Brachas Torah and whatever else. No. Rashi says not like the other Mepharshim, Ibn Ezra and others. What's Yul Basar Echad? What does it mean? How do you become Basar Echad? Shezera Yotze Mehem, Shenesa Basar Ein Va'av Echad Bo. It's referring to your children. Through you and your wife, your child is one conglomeration, one aggregation of both of you together. That is the Basar Echad. Your children, not you, your children.
That sounds like there would be a difference between the donor egg and the surrogate.
So in the case of, therefore says Rav Vazna, and he's talking about donor egg. He's talking about specifically about donor egg. He is talking about donor egg. So this is where donor egg is very different from surrogacy. In the case of surrogacy, it's the husband and wife having a baby, but they just have, I don't know how to put this in simple terms. They just got nowhere to put the baby. Rent a uterus, right? They got nowhere to put the baby because the mother, for whatever reason, cannot carry the baby. Her uterus is not functioning, doesn't have a uterus, whatever it might be. So therefore we have an incubator, essentially, for 9 months. But the zera is the husband and wife. No problem. That's the hayul basar echad. That makes sense. Yeah, but in the case of donor egg, says Rav Vazner, regardless of who you think the halachic mother is, at the end of the day, it's not the father and the mother coming together, v'hayul basar echad. It's the father with someone else who donated the egg.
Rashi's not passing halacha here. He's just giving a parish and what it means, basar echad.
Correct, but this pasuk, and Rashi quotes this in other places, in Rosh Hashanah, other places, this pasuk is part of the tivoy of pruvu. This is sort of what humanity is commanded in terms of relationships.
Not like the Ramban disagrees with Rashi on this. He doesn't.
Ibn Ezra says that's not the parish. Parish is the husband and wife. He says the parish Rashi is rachok. Right. The Radak also discusses it. Obviously, the other Mefarshim here, I emphasize that. This is Rashi. But says Rav Vazner, you see from here that there's an inyan of the father and mother having a child together. That is v'hayul basar, and that is the mitzvah of the vav be'ishto. And you are, again, I'm not saying this is as you pointed out, a mitzvah d'oraisa. I'm not saying this is an issa d'oraisa, but the point is, at least according to Rav Vazner, in the case of a donor egg, you're essentially having two foreign people having a baby together. That is not the davar be'ishto v'hayul basar echad. That is going against what the Torah wants from...
It's like a strike against donor eggs.
Strike against donor eggs. And he asks donor eggs. He asks donor eggs. Absolutely. Reverse.
On this basis, or?
Both on the yichus issue. And he says, but even if you leave out who's your mama, even if you leave out that question, he says, no, regardless of anything. That is what kedusha of marriage is in Klal Yisrael.
And you said Rav Sternbach also prohibits donor eggs.
Correct.
So we have two against. Okay.
Correct.
There's got to be someone for it.
Okay. Well, we're going to get to, hopefully we'll get to that. How are we doing? Okay, 15 minutes.
There's no Mr. Bersher at 9:30 tonight.
Oh, perfect. Okay, so we'll go till midnight then. No, I'm joking.
No, I'm saying, I can't speak for you guys, but if you go over a little bit, I'm okay with it.
Okay, so let's continue. That's actually, thank you for telling me that. Okay, so that's the second issue. So far, the two issues we have sort of be a bit fuzzy issues, which are Havchana, that's not fuzzy. We have a halachos based on that. You have to be mavchin, you have to differentiate between. But that would only apply according to the poskim that we said. Assume that you have to be choshesh for both parents. In that case, we're confused. If you're dead set on one being the mother and not the other one, then there's no issue of being confused about yichus, right? The second issue we said Ravazna is v'davak be'ishto. That is only by donor eggs. By surrogacy, there's no issue with that. And his chuvas are talking about specifically donor eggs. Egg donors. He is totally against that. He passes against that, as does Rav Sternbach.
Rav Wosner is against donor eggs.
Correct.
Against
he does not speak about surrogacy in his chuvas, at least. I don't know. But in his chuvas, he's against donor eggs. Rav Sternbach seems to be against both. For exactly the reason we said. We're not sure who the father, according to the first issue, we're not sure who the father-mother is. Perhaps both of them are not father. We're not sure who the mother is. Perhaps both of them have a partial mother situation. So therefore, we don't put ourselves in that situation where we don't know who the mother is. Based on the first, of course, yeah.
According to this Machar opinion that maybe they both have a status of being a mother.
Yes.
If
or at least l'chumra, yeah.
A Jewish woman would want to do this, would need she would want the donor egg to be from another Jewish woman.
We're going to get to that in a second.
Otherwise,
we're going to get to this in a second. Let's go back through the last pieces, which are the more complex pieces, and then come back to. So we're discussing whether it's mutter. If it's mutter, is there a way to make it mutter by defining who we're going to use as a surrogate, who we're going to use as an egg donor, and can we add other stipulations that might make it better? This is basically where we're going here.
They're answering it because of this, or they're
yes.
just saying they're just looking.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yes. It says yichus is such a yichus is the first thing you can thing you can understand more than the second one perhaps because there's a halacha based on it. But yes, that is an intrinsic thing for Klal Yisrael.
You don't go ahead and make.
You don't say yichus problem. So I mean, to your point, egg donors and surrogates do happen now. What is going to happen? It's very recent technology, and it only has an uptick right in the past couple of years. What happens when Mitzvah Hashem, these children come to get married? And who's your mother? We have to look at. I mean, it's going to cause technically it's a huge machlokas who the mother is. Can you imagine?
Who's your mother? Well, listen.
Right.
The new mission.
The woman who
and the surrogate kids.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to potentially cause issues.
I mean, I
not halachically.
Listen, I would be surprised if women, a married couple who does this, either egg donors or surrogacy, if they would want their child to have any contact with the other woman.
Perfect. Exactly what we're going to get up to right now. Okay, so because that's exactly the problem. So you're 100% right, and that's exactly the problem.
The lady out of the picture, and everything's fine.
Exactly the opposite. Exactly the opposite.
You have to have a hechsher on your kid. Is he a badat baby like?
But so this is exactly the problem. There's so many opinions. Okay. Let's get to this in a second. Okay, so the next part we're going to now is we're going to start off with a whole huge machlokas, which many of you are aware of, that happened in the 50s and 60s in the United States between Rav Moshe and Satmar Rav. So Rav Moshe came up with a famous psak about sperm donors. Very famous psak of sperm donors, which caused a huge controversy. Rav Moshe supposedly had a brick thrown through his window by Satmar Chasidim. It became a huge machlokas in New York. What was the psak? Let's first go to the psak before we go into what the consequence of that was. For Moshe, the question was, are you allowed to use a sperm donor for artificial insemination? Okay, not IVF, IUI as we call it, artificial insemination. Are you allowed to use a sperm donor because the husband does not have good quality sperm? Is that mutter? So Ramosha discusses two main points, both of which are relevant here. Point one, if you inject sperm from a foreign man into a married woman, does that render her asa to her husband? Is that baby a mamzer? So Ramosha says absolutely not. Absolutely not. Why not? So Ramosha quotes number 5 here. We've actually our first share that we had where we were discussing Ben Sira, if you might remember, and Ambati. This is the Taz that we quoted then. And this Taz has a lot of implications across fertility. It's very interesting how it's really the Hagas Asmak, one of the Rishonim, how one little piece can have so much impact on halacha. So the Taz quotes a question which was asked to the Smak b'shem Rabbeinu Peretz, and I'm going to read it inside. Matzati b'agos Smak Yosham b'shem Harav Peretz Isha Nida, a woman who's a nida. Yechola lishkov asdinei ba'ala. She is allowed to lay down on the covers on the bed of her husband. But that women are careful not to lie down on the blanket that another man lay on before. In case she will become pregnant from the semen of the man who was lying there previously. Again, I'm not going to discuss the biological reality here. Va'amai, the question was, so why, if women are afraid not to, or are careful not to lie down on a bed where a other foreign man was lying on it in case she will somehow get pregnant from the semen, why is she not afraid? She's a nida. Why is she not afraid also to lie down on her husband's bed in case she will get the semen from her husband and she'll become, and the child will be a ben hanida? Veheshiv, the response of Rav Peretz and the Smag. Veheshiv, Kimin de Inkan Bias Isur, since there is no physical relations, Havlad Kasher Legamre. We don't care. The Vlad is totally kosher. Afilu Tisabe Mishichvazer Shalacher, even if she were to become pregnant from somebody else. This is the Taz quoting the Hagasa Smak, the Rishon. In other words, what renders a child a mamzer? What renders an isur is a bias isur. Physical relations is what's asur. Semen went in and out. That doesn't make you asur. It doesn't make the child a mamzer. We don't really care. Ki halo ben sira, and this is what we discussed in our first year. Ben sira. Ben sira is the example brought down, whether it's an accurate example or not, but it's brought down. Ben sira was the son of Yirmiyahu. That's what the Rata brings down, Maharil. Ben sira kasher haya, ela the meshich vazer shel acher. Ben kasher haya, because Ben sira, who was born through an ambati, somehow his mother was in the bathhouse, and somehow she got pregnant from semen that was in the bath. And no one said that Ben sira was a mamzer. So he's kosher. But what are we afraid of? If we don't know if it's from another man, we're afraid we won't know who the father is. Havchana, which we just said about. That's what we're worried. We're not worried about mamzeros. And similarly, the last line in the Gemara number 1 here was, we're afraid in case he will marry his sister. He'll think his father is Joe, and really his father is Bob. And he'll go and marry Bob's daughter. Shema Yisachoso Me'aviv. That's what we're afraid. But no one is calling this child a mamzer. No one is going to say this woman who got pregnant this way, if she somehow magically got pregnant this way, would be also to her husband. No one's saying such a thing. Therefore, says Reb Moshe, what do you see? What makes a woman who has relations with another man asur? It's the relations with the other man. It's the physical relations. It's not whether she somehow got semen in her somehow magically from another man. There was no physical act. That doesn't make her asur. That doesn't make the child a mamzer. The only thing that makes a child a mamzer or the woman asur is if there was a physical relationship. That's what Ramosha said. Therefore, although Ambati is extremely unlikely, as we discussed, and all these sort of getting pregnant through a bathhouse, but this is exactly the example, says Ramosha. It's artificial insemination. There is no physical relationship. There's no intercourse. Yet, she gets the zera from somebody else, potentially. Does that make her asur? Does that make any child that's born from that a mamzer? Says Ramosha, no. So that's point number one. Point number one is the child is not a mamzer. There is no isser. Putting these two together, Ramosha put these two together, there is no isser going on, and the child is not a mamzer. So therefore, we don't have to do with mamzer. That's the first point of Ramosha. The second point that Ramosha said was, the second point is Shema Yisa Achoso, as he put down here. The second chashash is, if you don't know who your father is, because you're getting from a sperm donor, you don't know who your father is, because, to your point, people don't want sperm donors. I mean, there's whole huge legal court cases going on in the States right now about sperm donors who do not want to remain anonymous. There's whole legal contracts which are signed here about anonymity. They want to remain anonymous for obvious reasons. And the children want to find out who their father is. So these are exactly the cases that are going on right now. You're right. People don't want everyone to know who their offspring, genetic offspring is.
The parents of the child wouldn't want.
That might be true also. But once the child reaches 18, he can choose for himself, right? So now he or she decide they want to know who their biological father is. So these are court cases, legal cases that are going on in the States right now. How can this anonymity really hold against the wishes of the child to know who his father is, his or her father is? Okay, so given that the person doesn't know in many of these cases who their father is, usually doesn't know who their father is, we really have a real chashasha shema yisa achoso. So how do we deal with that? So this is point 2, says Ramosha. How you deal with that is a very simple thing. You use sperm from a guy.
Oh, that's what Ramosha says?
That's what Ramosha says.
Why?
Why? Because then, if you have a sperm from a guy and a Jewish mother, the child is Jewish. There is no yichus to the father. There's no connection to the father anymore. Halachically, there's no connection to the father.
Then you got a real problem. The father's a Cohen.
The father's definitely not Cohen if he's a guy.
No. If the father who has bad sperm.
Oh, that's what you're talking about. Yes. Okay.
Then they got a real problem. How do you raise this kid? His father's a Cohen.
Very legitimate question. Very legitimate question. Let's just get back to that in a second.
All right.
But you're 100% right. So, but Ramosha doesn't deal with that specifically. He says Shema Yisach also doesn't apply. So therefore, Ramosha is matir. I don't remember the exact words, but something to the effect of B'shas hatchak gadol. I think that's his wording. B'shas hatchak gadol, where there's no other way to use sperm donor who is a goy for artificial insemination. That was Ramosha's psak.
You said you could use a Jew? Jewish sperm donor?
I just said from a goy. If you're using a Jew, you have Shema Yisach also.
So then what's B'shas? Why do you say B'shas hatchak gadol?
Meaning, if there's no other way for them they've tried to have children, and there's no other way, this is the only way, to use a guy's sperm. He absolutely is not matter a Jewish sperm donor. No one is matter a Jewish sperm donor. Okay?
So what do you do here in Israel?
Just one second. So that was Ramosha's psak. When Ramosha's psak came out, the Satmarav came out very wildly and very vehemently against this psak. Okay, what are the reasons he came out against this psak? One, your assumption that a mamzerus and isur eshasish is dependent on bias isur, as we see from the smak. Your assumption that it's dependent on actually a physical relationship, the Satmarav disagrees with that. He brings a couple of makoros that, and we're going to see one in a second, the Ramban, which he quotes. The Ramban here in Pashas Achremos, come makoros that no, there is an issue of, even if there's no bias isur, there's an issue of adultery, if you want. An issue of isur eshasish, even if it's just zera, even if it's just the zera of a different man going into the woman. That's the first thing he says. So the Satmarav holds that if you were to have, in theory, a Jewish sperm donor, it's not just Shema Yisa Achosa, we don't know. It's mamzerus. and the woman is also to her husband. That's the first. So he argues on the first point over Moshe.
Okay. What Satmar was also against the Goyish?
Correct. So that's on as far as the Jewish sperm donor.
What does he do with that?
Okay. What does he do with that Taz? Great question. It's a bit complicated, but he brings other Makoros that hold not like this. One of those is the Ramban, number 6 here. The Ramban says, and this is the Pasuk in Parshas Achremos. Number 6 is the last Makor I have here to go inside today. And to your friend's wife, you shall not, let's try and translate this in some sort of accurate way, you shall not sleep with, you shall not lie with, lezara, for zera, seed. Says the Ramban. Amar Rabbi Avram, this is quoting the Ibn Ezra. I'm just skipping a bit here, obviously. Why did the pasuk say lezara actually? Lahazkir tahama isur, to tell us what the reason for this is. Kilo yivadah hazera lemihu, because once you mix up the zera, you won't know who the kid is, who it belongs to. V'yavo mizeh to'avos gedolos v'ra'os l'shnehem. So Eishes Amitchal Tizishchav Zera says, you see, the Ramban brings up Pshat that it means that there's the issue of Zera, even if there's no physical act. It's the Zera itself that causes this break in the bond between a husband and wife. That is Eishes Amitchal. It's not just to do with the BS. So it's even if it's just the Zera. So Rosh Sternbach says he doesn't understand this raya, because the Ramban after this brings other pshatim, and he says V'li nira ikar, a different pshat. So it's very nice quoting one pshat the Ramban brings, but the Ramban himself dismisses that. But this is an example. I'm just giving you an example here of how the Satmar Rav felt that, and other poskim after him, that it's a mamzer mamish, because it's not just a physical act that renders a break in the relationship. It renders a isur, it renders mamzerus. It's even without a physical act of intercourse. It's even if there's just zera involved from somebody else, that already renders the woman asur, like she slept with another man, and it renders the child a mamzer. So that's on point 1. Point 2, what do we do with the guy? Okay, by a guy there is no mamzerus. So what's wrong with using donor sperm? What's wrong with that? So he says that, and as other poskim say, that if you read the Gemara, number 1, again, there are other issues, not just Shema Yisai Sachoso Me'aviv. You mentioned other possible issues. The yichus as far as the kohen, if the non-biological father is a kohen. But the Gemara brings a whole list of different things. Shema v'yabeim eishes achiv me'imo. Perhaps, now let's try and, I'm just going to do one of them. Perhaps he'll do yibum. Perhaps he'll think his what? Okay. See if I can even describe this accurately. V'yabem eishes achiv me'imo. Let's say his mother has another child, and his brother from his mother is nifta without children, and he'll think, oh, I got to do yibum. We're both from the same father. When in reality, they're not from the same father. So yibum, if you're not really out to do it, it's courage. You don't have to marry your brother's wife. Okay? So he'll think, oh, I'll do yibum, because he thinks it's his brother, but it's not really his brother. So there are other chashashos which apply here. And those chashashos apply, he might think, applies even if it's a goy. He doesn't know who the sperm donor is. He still thinks it's his brother. So there's still a chashash that he'll do yibum. Again, Baruch Hashem, yibum doesn't happen too often. But there's a chashash of confusion. And there's a couple of other examples here in the Gemara in Yevamos. Whatever, there's a couple of other examples where the person won't know who his father is, and it can lead to halachic, problematic situations. Okay? There are other issues.
That already takes it down. It's not like the Talmud are afraid to marry outside because you're going to be marrying your mom there.
So, by a guy, there's no issue of mamzerus. Everyone agrees that. Okay. But there's still all these other halach issues which are brought in the Gemara.
I'm just saying,
on top of that,
the Talmud can't marry out of the Talmud.
No.
Because they don't marry mamzerim.
No. The other thing which he brings down is exactly what we spoke about before. Yichus. You're essentially bringing Goyish, you're essentially mixing up Jewish Yichus with Goyish Yichus, which we spoke about before, Havchana. You shouldn't do that. Okay, so the Summer Rav is totally against this whole thing. Most poskim were against Rav Moshe on this. Most poskim were against Rav Moshe on this. Pretty much across the board. The Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Vadia Yosef, Minchas Yitzchak. I mean,
we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago.
We very briefly, not in depth.
Not the Rav Moshe, but we spoke
Right. So most poskim were against this. This concept of Rav Moshe. Although Rosh Shlomo Zalman in a Yachon called Noam many years ago, Rosh Shlomo Zalman seemed to say like Rav Moshe. Seemed to be matzah like Rav Moshe. But to use b'shas Chag Gadol, to use Goyish, a guy is a sperm donor because there's no mamzerus and there's no shema yisach also, and b'shas Chag Gadol we sort of get away from everything else basically. Okay, but most poskim held not like Rav Moshe, and Rav Moshe it seems, and this is very interesting because I tried to research this online. If you research it online, everyone quotes Rav Moshe. This is Rav Moshe Psak. Supposedly Rav David finds in Shlita says that this is Rav Moshe Psak, but Rav Moshe himself is quoted in a sefer in the 60s, which is quoted by Tzitz Eliezer and Rav Avadia and other poskim that Moshe was chozebo. And he said, Lamaisa, we shouldn't do it. You're not allowed to do it. So I'm not sure.
Wait, is that the Geras Moshe?
It's not, the fact that he was chozebo is not an Igros Moshe. It's in a different sefer, and I just don't remember the name of it from the top. But the Tzitz Eliezer and Rav Avadia both say Rav Moshe would change his mind, and they quote the sefer. And Rav David says Rav Moshe didn't change his mind. So it could be that he didn't change his mind theoretically, but practically he said you shouldn't do it. That could be what it means. But regardless, let's try now that we discussed that, let's try and bring this over to our situation. In the case of surrogacy, is there an issue of mamzerus? So I would say, what would you say?
Putting the zera into a foreign woman.
So you're pouring in an embryo.
Wait a second.
Right?
Depends. Is the surrogate mother Jewish or Goy?
What?
Is the surrogate mother Jewish?
Thank you. So let's start with that. Exactly. That's the question we have to ask.
If she's a Goy?
If she's a Goy,
No problem with Mamzeris.
no problem with mamzerus, right? If she's a Jew, but theoretically a problem with mamzerus. Agreed?
If she's Eishes Ish.
Now, let's go back. If she's an Eishes Ish. Okay, so now we have three, thank you. You're doing my work for me. So we have three possible categories of who the surrogate or donor mother can be. It can either be a Goy, it can be a married Jewish woman, it could be a Pnuya, a single Jewish woman, or a divorced Jewish woman. That's, as far as we're concerned, that's the same thing. A non-married Jewish woman.
Well, probably it could be the sister of anyone that's prohibited from Arias.
Yeah, 100%. Yes, okay. Obviously there's other rights. But I'm saying, okay, let's try and, in large labels, there's three possibilities here. So in the case of, if you're using a Goy, there's never an issue of mamzerus. Right? Now, we have to go back to the question, who is the mother? Who is the halachic mother? This is where it gets complicated. If the halachic mother is the mother who gave birth, right?
And the child's not Jewish.
Then you used a Goy as a surrogate, then the child is not Jewish, but there's no mamzerus. And then you have to do gir. You have to do girs. If you use a surrogate who is Jewish, if she's married, there's a potential issue of mamzerus, an issue of shemei sachoso. If you use a pnuya, there's no issue of mamzerus, assuming no arayos in general, as you pointed out. There's no issue of I was going blank. There's no issue of mamzerus or isser, but there still could be a problem with shemei sachoso. I mean, she has children afterwards, right? Maybe. If you go by the genetic mother, the real mother is the one who at conception, then we don't really care who the surrogate mother is, lechora, right? Yeah. As far as shemai sachoso, who cares? Your achos is from your mother, the genetic mother, so we don't care about shemai sachoso. And mamzerus, if we use either a non-married, non-erva Jewish woman or a guy, there's no issue. Agreed? Okay. As far as donor eggs, we can make the same cheshbon basically. So, without going into details, it's already getting late. So basically, One way to get around some of this is choose your donor or your surrogate very carefully. So Rav Avadia says, for example, Rav Avadia's tshuvas are not written down. He did not write tshuvas on this. Supposedly it's brought down that he specifically didn't write tshuvas on this on purpose. He didn't want to put his thoughts on paper. He said it was too complicated. Which for Rav Avadia, given his wealth and breadth of tshuvas, he wrote about everything. He wasn't afraid. But for this, he's quoted as saying he didn't want to. It's too complicated. So Rav Avadia says he's matir donor eggs, but only via a single non-erva Jewish woman. He's not matir by a guy. You're not allowed to do a guy yichus. You're not allowed to use a guy, and you're obviously not allowed to use a married woman because then you have the mamzerus issues and shem yisach also. So he's matir b'shas adchak if you need to use a isha Israelis pnuya.
Why not matter a goy and just do your myself?
So there's things to be said for a goy because there's no mamzerus, no shema yisach also. That is the pluses for using a goy. Agreed? There's the pluses for using a Jewish woman because you're not the yichus issue in terms of using a goy. So the middle ground is you use a Jewish woman but who doesn't have erva, i.e. That's basically what Rav Avadia said. He wasn't matir. It's interesting. He was matir donor eggs and not matir surrogacy.
Rav Avadia.
Yes. Which is interesting. You would think the other way around. So because he didn't write this in the tshuva, I don't know what the exact reasoning is. Because I would think the other way around, according to everything we've seen. That I've seen. Yes, that I've seen. Yeah. Most people are more machmer by donor eggs. Yeah. For obvious reasons. But again, he's not around, Zichrono Livracha, and he didn't write it on paper, so I don't really know why that is the case. However, so there's another way we can get around some of this. What's another way we can get around Shema Yisach also? So Razal Menachemia writes, and this is basically based on Rav Shlomo Amar. Rav Shlomo Amar was the Rav Rashi. And now he's Rav Yerushalayim. So Rav Shlomo Amar, when he was the Rav Rashi, came up with a psak, and he quoted Rav Avadia. This is one of the Makoros of what Rav Avadia said. He quoted Rav Avadia, and he came up with a psak that surrogacy was muter, egg donors were muter. Oh. Based on that, the law in Israel, there was a whole law that came out, Chok Apunta Ka'ut, I don't remember exactly what it's called, in 2006, I think, where they set very, very rigid and specific standards about surrogacy and donor eggs and who can do it and whatever. And one of the things they said, brilliant, I don't know why I didn't think of this, is that you have to write down in the case of surrogacy, both mothers have to be registered. It has to be written down, rashum.
On the birth certificate?
That I'm not sure about the specific details.
Registered where?
Right. No, I'm not. Yes, exactly. I'm not sure about the specific. So Rav Zalman Nechem was asked, can you use this? Because then the issue of Shema Yisach also goes away. You know who both your mothers potentially are, right? So if you know who both your mothers are, there's no Shema Yisach also. And if we use a Jewish non-arayos, there's no issue of mamzerus. You get around most of the issues. You still have the issue of yichus. But you get around at least the primary yisurim you get around. So therefore, Zalman Nechemia was is matir. Surrogacy and is matir donor eggs. But only if it's rashum, only if both parents both potential sides are written down, because then you get away from a lot of the yichus issues, even the yichus issues, you sort of know who both sides are. You get away from the Shema Yisachos, so you're not worried about marriage issues later on. And as long as you don't use a married Jewish woman or an erva, then you have no problems with mamzerus. So therefore, there are poskim who are matir. There are here Rav Zalman Nechemia, Rav Amar. And you saw Rav Avadia's matir by donor eggs. There are poskim who matir certain things, but in very, very limited situations. There are a lot of poskim we saw who, because of the yichus issues and because of all the other issues, are also across the board. Rav Eliashiv is also. I don't believe in Shari Tzedek they do any of these procedures.
Shari Tzedek they do
because that goes according to the Psak Rav Eliashiv. That is what my understanding at least.
I will try to
you will find out, but from my understanding...
I'll try to find. My wife hasn't worked there for very
Okay, but from my understanding, Shari Tzedek, which followed the Psak, when they set up the IVF unit, followed the Psak of Rav Eliashiv,
They do the artificial insemination and the...
They'll do IVF, they'll do artificial insemination, but they won't do surrogacy and egg donors. That's my understanding, at least. Because he's asked it. He said, for the reasons we spoke about, the whole machlokas of Moshe and the Sat Mirav, he says that there's no difference between a sperm donor and an egg donor. If you're saying there's an issue with a sperm donor because of Shema Yisach, so what's the difference between that and an egg donor? Same problems, essentially. And if you're saying the problem with Yichus, it's the problem with Yichus here also, what's the difference? So therefore, Rabbi Yashiv was Oser. Are the people who are matter? Yes, as we just said. There are people who are matter.
What about Machon Pua? How do they hold on?
Machon Pua is very, I'm trying to think of the right word here, deals with this very abstractly. They ask you who your posek is. And they will pass him for you based on who your Rav is, if that makes sense. So if you're a Gera Chassid, they'll give you psak according to who you say you follow.
Do you know what the Gera Rebbe says?
I don't. I just gave that as an example. But basically, so that's Machon Pua is very deals with this sort of very abstractly.
But it sounds like they will in certain situations assist people with surrogacy and egg donors.
Absolutely. If that's your psak. So as we see, this is a very problematic field. A lot of poskim are oser. Some poskim are matir, but in very specific situations. There are people who say this is not so posh. Everything we're talking about is not so posh, even for those who are matir. You don't get a surrogacy off the supermarket shelf, right? So I'm looking for a Yisraelis Pnuya. They're not always available. If you're in Israel, maybe they're available more. If you're living in Yehopiksville, in the States, they're not necessarily available. Are you allowed to use a goy? So a goy will be the second best, obviously. There's no one who is matir to use a married, as far as I know, to use a married Jewish woman for a surrogate or for an egg donor. As far as I know, there's no one who's matir such a thing.
Did you discuss whether they're...
We discussed that in the beginning, yes. We discussed that with IVF. And this is just a take on IVF, essentially, yeah.
So it would be the same...
Yes, well... Yes, I mean, so it's IVF combined with who's the mother. Yeah. So in the Peruvu obviously doesn't really go with the mother in that sense.
It's not really so clear whether Mekayim Peruvu.
So the opinions on both ends. Most poskim nowadays hold that because IVF has become the regular way of a regular way of having children, and we just quoted the statistic that over 4% of babies in Israel are born through fertility treatments. 4%, over 4%. So that since
through all fertility.
Yes, through all fertility. So since that has become such a normal thing, that is considered a regular way of having kids. So therefore, Rosh Steinbach, for example, who initially said no to IVF, it's not Peruvu, it's not anything, he was not matir, it seems. Later on, in a more recent shuvah, he says it's fine, because it's become the way of doing Peruvu. It's the normal way of doing Peruvu nowadays. Therefore, it's part and parcel of the regular mitzvah. That's what he says. So most poskim hold that it is Peruvu. Tzitz Eliezer, in many chuvas said that IVF is not Peruvu. It seems, and that he asked at IVF, and he always asked at IVF. In his last days, Bronstein from Machon Pua supposedly spoke to him, and he changed his mind, but it's not in writing.
But also they brought. I remember a couple weeks ago when there was Zalman Nachman, he said something about the happiness of the couple.
Yes. So this is exactly what we're talking about. That we have all these issues here. How some of these mamzeros you're not going to push off if there's an issue with mamzeros. Shema Yisach Choso. Yeah. The yichus. So we're talking about a lot of lechatchilas and b'di'eved. What constitutes a b'di'eved? A couple can't have children. That might very much constitute a b'di'eved, not a lechatchila. So this is where the poskim, if you're dealing with mamzerus, no one's going to say to a married Jewish woman, no one's going to be matir, as I said. Right? You're dealing with mamzerus. There's no room to be matir. Shema Yisach Choso, yichus, the whole yichus issue, especially if you're writing it, if it's registered, that's why Zalman Nachman says there's not a problem, because this is a shasat chak. A couple doesn't have children.
Have you seen any of the poskim encouraging adoption?